All right, guys, this is the video for this week, at least one of the videos, and it's a topic we've kind of held off talking about for a while in Faith Forward just because we wanted to hopefully do this in person. Obviously, that didn't work out the way we wanted it to, so we're going to do the best we can here, but it's a very important topic. It can be a very personal topic. It can be a very fiery topic. We're going to try to deal with it in a calm, respectful way, understanding the difficulties of things, and yet kind of in a straightforward manner to get right to the point. All right, so the question today is, what about abortion? First and foremost, if you or someone you know has had an abortion, please know that there is forgiveness available even for that in the blood of Jesus on the cross for you. It's no worse than any other sin. It's forgiven just as any other sin is forgiven. And therefore, we're not casting judgment upon people who find themselves in these kinds of situations when talking about these things. We're just trying to deal with them as fairly as we can as we go through things here. All right. And secondly, I think I can speak for Mr. Grepke to some extent here, but I've been telling my classes this for at least for a couple of years. If you find yourself pregnant or are involved in a relationship where that happens or this kind of thing, and you're considering abortion because you think there's no way out, I will adopt your baby. And if I can't adopt your baby, I will find someone to adopt your baby. There are plenty of people around the country who would love to adopt your baby rather than have the baby be killed in abortion. And so if that's something that you're seriously struggling with, contact me, contact Mr. Grepke, contact the pastor in the area. We will find someone to adopt your baby. That will not be an issue. If you need support, you need diapers, you need money, you need childcare, that kind of thing, there are resources out there that I would love to connect you to try to solve some of those very serious complications with this issue. Okay. Next. We're going to cover this topic from three perspectives. I'm going to do this kind of as quickly as I can here, so forgive me for going through these things quickly. The first way we'll look at this is through theology. The second way is through science. And the third way is through some basic logic we've been talking about. Okay, so the foundational question I want you to think about when engaging in this topic is, what is that thing in the womb? What is that thing? Okay, is it a human being? Is it not a human being? Is it a potential person? Is it a real person? Is person not a good word to use? What is that thing? Is it a tumor? Is it a parasite? Is it a growth? Is it part of the mother's body? What is that thing? The way you answer that question, what is that thing in the womb, will determine the way you answer the other questions and deal with the situations we'll be talking about. Okay, so that's a very important question. So think for yourself, what is that thing in the womb? And then allow yourself to be informed by the clear reasoning and other facts that we have as we talk about this. Okay, some people like to use the word fetus instead of the word baby. I use them kind of interchangeably sometimes. The word fetus, this is just a dictionary I pulled off my computer. It's built into your computer probably too. It says it's a noun, fetus is a noun, an unborn offspring of a mammal, in particular an unborn human baby, more than 8 weeks after conception. Okay, so the dictionary here even says it's a human baby. All right, so when I use that term fetus or baby in this case, I'm using them interchangeably. My wife just gave birth to our fifth child a couple months ago now. It's about 6 months ago now. And we went into ultrasound several times, and the ultrasound technician always said baby when looking at the baby on the ultrasound. Okay, so the medical professionals know that it's a baby. It's not born, but fetus doesn't mean something not human. It just means unborn human baby. Okay, just so we're clear about the terminology there. All right, the theology is actually very quick on this. Here's a couple verses concerning this. David says in Psalm 51, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. All right, and so if an unborn child can be sinful, that means that they're actually a person. There's actually a human being in there that can be sinful, that has been conceived, and therefore and is under the curse of sin from their forefather Adam, and therefore could be redeemed by Jesus in what he did. All right, another verse. From my mother's womb you have been my God. All right, so before you were born, David says here, you have been my God. And then when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, this is the baby inside Elizabeth's womb, if you know the Bible a little bit, is John the Baptist. So John the Baptist leaps inside Elizabeth when she hears Mary's greeting. Mary is pregnant with Jesus at this time. Okay, and so we see that the babies in the womb are treated with respect, and that they're called babies, and that they actually are doing things before they're born. And they're filled with the Holy Spirit, which animals aren't filled with the Holy Spirit. Non-human things aren't filled with the Holy Spirit, but the baby in Elizabeth's womb here is. All right, and then just basically Exodus, that should be Exodus 20, that's a typo. Exodus 20:13 says, "You shall not murder." It's in the Ten Commandments, right? The taking of human life without just cause is murder, and therefore that's it. So if you're coming at this from a Christian perspective, and we've been encouraging you to do this all year long, that the Bible's reliable, it's true, it's been copied accurately, and therefore it gives us the true record of what actually happened to Jesus, that he lived, that he died, that he rose, and because of that we can be confident that he's God, then what his word says should affect the way that Christians view things, right? So as a Christian, it seems very clear that our theology says that we should not take the life of unborn children without any kind of extreme cause, and we can talk about those here in a little bit, if there are any causes that would allow for that kind of thing to happen. All right. Additionally, some questions to think about concerning the theology. How should we view a child, right? Should we view the child as a curse or a blessing? When someone finds out they're pregnant, should that be a cause of rejoicing, or that should be a cause of sorrow and mourning, right? And oftentimes we see that being pregnant is a fearful thing. People fear that they're pregnant because they don't want to be for a variety of reasons. But the Bible talks about children as a blessing, as an intruder or a gift, right? Is it something that doesn't belong there, that a woman can get rid of out of her body anytime she wants? Or is a child a gift that should be respected and protected whenever possible? How could having a child, even if under difficult circumstances, be beneficial to us, right? I'm not saying, and again, I'm going through this very quickly, so please don't take this as me being heartless or anything, okay? But is there a chance for something to be a blessing, even if it's very difficult, okay? This could allow us to experience the intense love of a parent, right? Even if there are challenges, and there are, no matter what the pregnancy or the childbirth looks like, to experience some intense love and what God, some small sliver of what God has for us. It helps us to better understand the love that God has for us, as I just mentioned. It helps us better understand God's sacrifice, that God sacrifices himself for us. He doesn't have to, but he chooses to do that because he loves us. And parents sacrifice for their children all the time. Sometimes their lives, but mostly their time, their energy, their convenience, their money, right? And the Bible seems to encourage us to do that it's worth it. And sometimes our culture doesn't encourage us to do that. It encourages us to make choices out of convenience rather than self-sacrifice. Right? And so it helps us to become more sacrificial and less selfish. All right, and then lastly, how could having a child be beneficial to the child, right? Well, obviously, the gift of life is one of the best gifts you can give to someone, and to take that life is seen as one of the worst things you can do, right? We have some of the highest penalties in our country for murder because it's taking the life of someone and they can't get that back, right? And the gift of eternal life is the best gift you could ever give someone. And you can do that by being a parent as well, or at least by seeing that your child grows up with parents that can take care of them and tell them about the love of Jesus whenever possible. All right, so that's the theology. It seems very simple. It's very straightforward. We'll move on to the science here. All right, the science is very clear as well. You guys know this, but when pregnancy occurs when the sperm penetrates the egg to form a zygote, it's a one-celled embryo. It's technically not a fertilized egg. That's not an accurate description. It's actually an embryo. It's a new human life. This embryo is alive. It meets all the criteria of a living organism. If we found one of these on Mars, we could rightly say we found life on Mars. Okay, it's a living thing. It has the ability to grow, to metabolize, and react to stimuli and reproduce, all on its own, all in its DNA, right there from the moment that it begins to exist. This embryo is human. Obviously, it's not something else. It's not bovine or canine or feline. It's human, right? And therefore, it's a human life, and that deserves some kind of protection under the law, at least a lot of people feel. It is the offspring of humans, right? Two humans make another human. Two humans don't make something that is almost human or potentially human. Humans make humans, dogs make dogs, etc. It has human DNA. All of the DNA that you have in your body was there from the moment that you were conceived, from the time the sperm met the egg. And all the instructions for the rest of your DNA coding has been there from the beginning. Eye color, adult balding, everything in between is all there from that moment. This embryo is distinct. It's not part of the mother's body. It has unique DNA, and it autonomously directs its own development. Okay, so the mother is not running the development of the baby at that point. The mother is providing nutrients, obviously, and it is taking a toll on her body. There's no question about that. But the baby itself is directing its own development because it has all the instructions built in. All right, additionally, at 3 weeks, the baby's heart is beating. So pretty much by the time you know you're pregnant, the baby's heart is beating. At 6 weeks, brain waves can be detected. At 8 weeks, every organ is present and has the appearance of an infant. And I'll show you a picture of that in a second. At 10 weeks, the baby is sensitive to touch and has the ability to squint, smile, and frown. And all of this takes place within the first trimester, right? First trimester abortions are legal in every state in our country. And so all the babies that get aborted are all capable of these kinds of things by the time they get aborted in our country. Here's an 8-week-old baby fetus. You can see it's obviously a human being there. You see the eyes, you can see the veins and blood vessels forming in its head. Okay, obviously it looks a little strange. It's still developing and all that, right? But it's obviously a human. It's not something else, even from the very beginning, right? 8 weeks is very, very early in the pregnancy. Okay, jumping to the logic then. Okay, so if the theology says this is a human being worthy of protection, made in God's image, right? That Jesus takes on human flesh in this form. Jesus didn't become human when he was born. He became human when he was conceived by the Holy Spirit in the Virgin Mary, right? The science seems to tell us this is a human being that's living inside of the mother, right? It's a unique human being, has its own DNA, probably has its own blood type, possibly has its own sex, right? Obviously, women can carry male children, okay? The logic of this. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples of objections that people will use sometimes against abortion. Okay, and we'll just kind of talk through them and see if they're consistent. Again, we don't want to be consistent in our argumentation. We don't want to have double standards. Okay, we want to be consistent in what we're saying here. So people sometimes say fetuses are not people because they're not viable outside the womb. They can't live outside the womb. Okay, and this is true up to a point. Now, it used to be 10 years ago or so, or even than that if a baby was born at around 30 weeks or so, that would be a very difficult situation, and a lot of babies didn't survive at that point. Our medical technology has advanced, which is a wonderful thing, and now the youngest baby that I'm aware of who survived being delivered early was born at 20 and a half weeks. Okay, full term is 40 weeks, right? 20 and a half weeks, so barely over halfway through the pregnancy, and yet we were able to keep this child alive through this. Okay, so viability has been pushed way back and potentially will get pushed back even further. Okay, so a lot of these babies, these fetuses, are able to survive outside the womb. And if this is your main objection, then you should at least say abortion shouldn't be allowed after 20 and a half weeks, right? Most people in my experience that are from the pro-choice side would not say that. They would say abortion should be allowed for any reason. People can make their own choices. Women can make their own choices, this kind of thing. But the fact is that they're viable, at least in some circumstances, from about 20 and a half weeks on. All right. But if we take this logic and continue it, right, then when exactly does a fetus become viable, right? And we know that it happens fairly early, right, within about 20 and a half weeks. Okay. And does it really matter if it can live outside the mother or not, right? Does your environment change whether or not you are valuable, right? You can't live outside certain environments here on Earth, right? If we took away the oxygen, you wouldn't be able to live, or took away the sun or this kind of thing in some circumstances, right? So just because you're in a different environment or you're reliant on something doesn't mean that you're not valuable and that we can therefore get rid of you, okay? Everyone is non-viable relative to their environment. Why should we single out one environment for a specific type of people? Should we deny personhood to someone who is unable to survive in certain circumstances? So let's say you have somebody who's really, really allergic to something, right? Some kind of allergy, okay? So we should say, well, this person can't live outside their, let's say it's an extreme circumstance. They get very sick if they're outside their own home. They have to have some kind of extreme filtration system in their home to keep them alive or this kind of thing, right? Are they therefore not valuable because they can't live outside their home or not live outside their home very long, right? Of course not. And so to say that a fetus is not a person or should not be protected because they're not viable outside the womb is to create a double standard that we don't see anywhere else. Right? Another objection that people will use sometimes is fetuses are not people because they are less developed. Okay, and therefore they don't deserve protection. They're less developed. Okay, and certainly they're less developed. There's no question about that. Okay, but do you know who else is not fully developed? You. Right? Your brain is not fully developed until you're about 25 or so. Right? So are you not worthy of protection? Are you not a person? Right? Where do we draw the line? What's developed enough to be protected? Does it have to be fully developed? What's the difference between an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old? Is one more developed and therefore more protected, more valuable? What's the difference between a baby who's 5 seconds out of the womb and 5 seconds in the womb before they're born? Is there a difference there in terms of the creature that's there? No, it's the same exact creature. It's the same exact organism, right? 10 seconds isn't going to make any kind of difference, right? It's true that they're more developed, but then where do you draw the line on that, right? I would argue that when the human life is created, that's the best place to draw the line. And once that life has been created, it's wrong to take that life. It's wrong to end that life unless you have some kind of extreme circumstance allowing for that. Another one that people will often use: fetuses are not people because they haven't been born yet. Well, that's true, they haven't been born, but the question is, why does birth change things, right? How does your location affect your personhood? Are you more of a person here than you are in Africa or something like that? No, we wouldn't say that at all, right? And so your location then doesn't actually change your value either. Fetuses are not people because they're living off their mother. Okay, certainly the baby is getting nutrients from their mother. There's no question about that. I'm not trying to minimize the amazing capability of the mother to keep the child alive. It's a fantastic miracle that God has built into the female body. Okay, but just because they're living off their mother doesn't mean they're not valuable. Infants live off their parents. Okay, in fact, before the fairly recent invention of a formula, babies needed a mother or at least someone else to provide milk to keep them alive, right? The vast majority of human history, infants have needed their parents. That doesn't mean that they weren't valuable and that somehow formula now makes them valuable when they weren't valuable before. Okay, just because you need someone else to live doesn't mean you're not valuable. And then if we expand this, what does it mean if you're living off of something? Let's say you had surgery and you're hooked up to a machine. Maybe something is breathing for you or pumping blood around, right? And you'll recover, but you need time to heal, right? Are you not a person? Can someone walk into the hospital and kill you just because you need something else to live? You're not completely independent, right? I would argue that almost none of us are completely independent in any way anyway. And so I don't think this is a good reason to take the life of an unborn child. Moving on, people sometimes will say fetuses are not people because they're part of the mother's body. Now, this is the most interesting argument that I get sometimes. Think about this: is that really true? Can you actually defend that? This is a scientific statement, right? Part of the mother's body. Okay, if that's true, why do babies have different DNA than their mother? Why do babies probably have a different blood type than their mother? And in some circumstances, they have a different sex than their mother, right? So if we're really going to say that fetuses are part of the mother's body, then we should stop teaching kids that humans only have 2 arms and 2 legs and 1 head, because pregnant women have 2 heads and 4 arms and 4 legs. Is that really the case? No, we recognize that's not the mother's head. It's not the mother's legs or the mother's body. And pregnant women don't have penises, right? And yet they can be pregnant with a child that's a boy that does have a penis, right? And so this is not a rational argument at all. This doesn't make any kind of sense, okay? We know that humans have 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, this kind of thing, and that's something else inside that mother. That's why I said the foundational question is, what is that thing inside the mother we have to think about? If the fetus were truly part of the mother, she would have double the amount of body parts, like I just said, okay? And nobody says that's true. It's the baby. The baby is delivered, right? And if you listen to anybody in the medical field, they will use this terminology. They'll talk about the baby's head, the baby's arms, okay? Again, the ultrasound technicians at our most recent appointments use this terminology consistently, and I was paying attention to it because I tend to engage in these kinds of conversations, okay? They would say, baby's doing this, baby's doing that, baby's head's over here, baby's feet are down here. It's obviously the baby's feet, not the mother's 4 feet. Continuing. Fetuses are not people because they don't feel pain. All right, now, this is not true anyway, depending on when you're looking at the fetus. Fetuses do feel pain very early, as we already talked about, okay? But let's say for the sake of argument this was true. There are some people who have a kind of disorder that actually they don't feel pain, which you might think is awesome, but then you realize that pain actually keeps you safe, right? If you put your hand on something that is hot, you'll feel pain in your hand and you'll want to pull your hand away, and that's good. If you leave your hand on something that's hot, it'll burn you, right? And so not feeling pain sounds like a good thing, but you could get very seriously injured without even realizing it if you can't feel pain. Right now, the situation is, though, if fetuses are not people because they can't feel pain, then what about people who have this particular type of disorder? Are they not people because they can't feel pain? What if you're sleeping or you're unconscious or you're in a coma and you can't feel pain? Do you lose your personhood? Are you no longer protected by the law? Should somebody be able to walk into the hospital and kill you because you're not feeling pain now? What if you're on extreme painkillers and you can't feel pain, right? So if you're going to be consistent in your argument, this is not a good one, right? The lack of feeling pain doesn't necessarily mean something is a person or not. And animals feel pain, and it's legal to kill animals in a lot of different circumstances, right? So the lack of feeling pain or the ability to feel pain is not a good marker for whether or not we should protect something or not necessarily, right? Can we kill people as long as they don't feel it? That's the good question to respond back to this with. All right, another objection here. Fetuses are not people because they are not self-conscious. Okay, their consciousness hasn't kind of clicked on yet, right? Now, we don't know for sure when our consciousness kind of clicks on. Maybe it's earlier than we think. It's hard to tell. People are doing research on some of these kinds of things, okay? But just because you don't have consciousness, or at least we can't tell that you have consciousness, is not a good reason to take someone's life. Even if we don't know about this, we're not sure, right? It's an open question maybe, okay? To use another example, let's say that I have a building over here. Let's say it's an old casino or something they're getting rid of on the strip, right? And I have some dynamite hooked up to that, and I bring over the switch to let you throw the handle down and blow up that old casino, right? And you say, well, is there anybody in that building? And I say, well, we're not sure. There might be. There's probably not, but we're not sure, okay? Are you going to feel comfortable throwing the handle down on that explosive? Probably not. You're probably going to want to know for sure, right? And the fact is, if we don't know for sure that fetuses or unborn children don't feel pain or aren't self-conscious or this kind of thing, maybe we should err on the side of caution. Maybe we should say, because we don't know, we should allow for the possibility of life, just like you would allow for the possibility of life until they can clear that building. You wouldn't feel comfortable shooting off the explosives. Right? What about people then who are sleeping or knocked out or in a coma? Because they're not self-conscious either, right? They might be kind of unconscious, as we call them, unconscious, right? So somebody hits you on the head and you're unconscious, now you have no value? Now we can kill you because you're not feeling pain or you're not conscious anymore, right? And that doesn't seem to fit. So again, showing some of the problems and some of the logic here. Some people use this one. Men are not qualified to speak on abortion because they're unable to have one, right? Obviously, men can't get pregnant and therefore they can't get an abortion, right? But the question is does the ability to get pregnant mean something in terms of your ability to make an argument, a scientific, logical argument, right? And I would argue that it doesn't matter what gender you are. You can speak about science, whether you're a man or a woman, and you can speak about morality, whether you're a man or a woman. And therefore, my ability to get pregnant or not has no bearing on my ability to be involved in the conversation. Now, you might say that I don't know what it's like to be pregnant, and I never will, and that's absolutely true, okay? And I think we need to be careful when we engage in discussions about pregnancy and what the toll is on the mother's body and these kinds of things, okay? But there are plenty of women who are pro-life, who would stand for the rights of the unborn. And so there's no rational reason to say that just because someone can't get pregnant, therefore they can't speak about issues of science or morality, right? This happens all the time. Just to go back to this one real quick, let's say that you don't have children, right? And I say I want to kill my child, and it should be legal to kill my child. And you say, well, I'm not married, I don't have any children, maybe I can't have children, but I think I should be able to tell you what you can and can't do with your children, right? Well, killing a child is wrong no matter what. Whether someone has children or whether they can't have children, they can still speak on that issue in society, right? And that's the same kind of thing here. Okay, moving on to the next one. Women should not be forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy. This is a lot of times where the conversation gets to in this. And I'm very understanding of the issue here, and I'm not trying to be a glib when I talk about things quickly. Okay, I think an unwanted pregnancy can be a very difficult thing to go through, especially if something that maybe wasn't even a consensual thing. Okay, I think it can be very difficult. I'm not trying to make light of that at all, right? And yet there is something worse than being forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy, right? What's worse than that is to be killed. What's worse than that is to have your life taken from you without just cause. That's worse, right? And so I'm not saying this is an easy thing, it's an easy problem, this kind of thing. I'm saying that whatever, if there's a human life on this side of the equation, whatever's on this side has to be at least as valuable as the human life. And if it's not, even if this is a very difficult thing, right, then it can't possibly take out the rights of this unborn child on the other side, right? The life of a human being is worth more than inconvenience or pain, even severe inconvenience or severe pain, right? Or trauma. The right of a human being to live is worth more than that, right? And so there's more conversation that's needed on that issue, but I'm just kind of laying this out very quickly here, okay? People should not be forced to their deaths, right? Again, this is not somebody who's guilty of committing crimes, of murdering someone, this kind of thing, right? This is someone who is just developing in their life, and to take that life from them because a woman doesn't want to be pregnant or because there's some other issues going on there, doesn't seem to be good. Now, the one exception to this that I think is a valid one is if there is something about the mother's health. If the mother will die before the baby can be born, okay, then you have two human lives, right? You have one on this side and one on this side, and therefore that's a very difficult decision. But I think that that's a different situation. Okay, so if it comes down to the mother is going to die, and the baby's going to die, or we have to do something about the pregnancy to stop that from happening, then if we have two lives over here and one life over here, I would rather lose one life than two lives. Okay, so that's an instance where maybe it would be justified. But we'll see here in a second, there's a very small percentage of those kinds of cases, thankfully. Okay, usually that's not the case whatsoever. And so the human life stands, right? What is more important than protecting a human life? And I would argue that nothing outside of another human life is equal in that respect. All right, a couple more of these. Abortion should be legal because sometimes women are victims of rape or incest. Okay, now unfortunately this is true. We know this, that women are raped, and this is a terrible thing. And again, I'm doing this very quickly, but I mean in no way to discount that experience or that trauma or make it sound like it's no big deal. It's a very big deal, okay? But the fact is that if this is your position, okay, that abortion should be allowed because of rape and incest, okay, then I would encourage you to be consistent and say that you should be against abortions except for the ones caused by rape or incest, right? That would be consistent. If that's your main motivation, rape and incest is a terrible thing forced on women, then abortion should be illegal in all the other cases, okay? Which, by the way, I don't know anybody who's pro-choice who takes that position. The people that I've talked to say that women should be able to make the choice for abortion whenever, however, no objections, no restrictions whatsoever, okay? The question is, how often does this actually happen? Okay. Now, if you're unwilling to say, yeah, I'm going to be against abortion except in the cases of rape and incest, then why do you bring up that exception, right? If you're bringing up the exception of rape to try to cover the rest of abortion, right, then the exception is not really your main point anyway, right? Then you have some other reason to be in favor of abortion, not just the rape thing, right? And again, this is my experience. This is people's position who take this side, okay? So you really shouldn't bring it up unless you're going to be consistent and say that all other abortions should be illegal. Now, here's a graph, and I can give the sources for this another time, of the reasons given for abortion, okay, by women when they get abortions, okay? And the elective, meaning it's their choice. They just don't want to have a child for whatever reason, okay? Financial reasons, relationship issues, they already have too many kids, they don't want to be a mom right now, this kind of thing, okay, is almost 98%. 98% of the time. That's the reason why. Those reasons, elective reasons that are not these other exceptions, right? Incest, very, very small percent of the time, okay, 0.03%. Physical life of the mother, that's what I talked about. If the mother's life is actually physically at risk, right, like she will die, okay, 0.1%, thankfully a very small number, okay? Still a serious issue, and still probably an issue for thousands of pregnancies every year, okay? But a very small issue compared to the whole of things, okay? Rape, a little bit larger, 0.3. The mental health of the mother, right, which can be a serious thing, but I don't think the mental health of the mother is going to be helped by getting rid of the pregnancy. The fetal health, so your child has Down syndrome or some other more serious physical defect, and they want to end the pregnancy because of that, okay? Is 0.5%, still a very small percentage. And then the physical health of the mother, not the life, but the health, right? It may complicate her health in some way, but not threaten her life, is slightly higher, 0.8%. But you can see all those together is still barely 2%, okay? So if those are your reasons for not wanting abortion to be illegal, because of the life of the mother, because of rape or incest, okay, then you should be against 98% of abortions, right? And certainly all of these should only be allowed up until a certain point, because again, after about 20 weeks, the unborn child can usually survive after they're born. Okay, certainly after 24 weeks, the survival rate is something like 80 or 90% after 24 weeks, and it gets higher the further you go. Okay, there's no reason for a late-term abortion, which is legal in some states in this country. That some states allow abortion up to birth, like the woman could be in labor and they can still abort the child. There's no need for an abortion at that point. They can just take the baby out. The pregnancy's over, she's not pregnant anymore, and the child survives. There's no reason to do abortions after the point of viability, unless you just want to be able to kill human beings, honestly. There's no reason for that. Even if you think abortion should be allowed earlier, no reason for abortion after that point in time. Okay, so my point is here with the incest and the rape thing, thankfully it's a very small percent of the time, and that shouldn't be your main reason for wanting there to be abortions. You got to think of something else if you're going to try to hold that position. Okay, a couple other facts on this. Most women who've had abortions felt pressure to terminate their pregnancies. Okay, almost 3/4 of them. This often comes from families, their family, their parents, or from a partner, from the person who got them pregnant, the man, the guy who got them pregnant. I would argue that actually anybody who gets you pregnant and then says you have to kill your child is not a man, and you should break up with them or leave them or whatever, and just pull child support from them, and they shouldn't have any choice whatsoever over what happens with you. They obviously don't value you, and they don't value your child. And so any pressure that comes in that respect would be inappropriate. Additionally, with this, 60% of women report suicidal thoughts post-abortion, and 50% of women begin or increase drug and alcohol abuse post-abortion. Abortion is a scarring thing. I'm not saying you can't get over it. There's forgiveness in Jesus, like I mentioned before, and that's important to mention. But it's not just a medical procedure like any other medical procedure. And you know it's not. It's a human life, and everybody knows that, right? We might use terms like end the pregnancy, but it's killing a child. It's killing a human being, and everybody knows that, okay? And because of that, a lot of women have trouble dealing with that later on in their lives. And I'm not happy about that. I want to help women in any way to support them in that, and lots of other ministries do too, but it's worth mentioning. Also, 50% of women report symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder post-abortion. That can be very difficult for some of them to deal with mentally after that fact. And then also 90% of women suffer damage in their self-esteem post-abortion, the vast majority of them, at least for a while. Okay, and that can be a very serious thing. Abortion is a very serious issue. It should be taken so. And it's something that women need help going through if they've had an abortion, and they need help avoiding if they're pregnant and considering abortion. And there are lots of good opportunities for adoption or some of those kinds of things. And again, I'd be happy to help anybody who's in that situation, or give you the number of someone who can do it better than I can. All right, continuing back with the logic, just a couple more of these and then we'll be done. If abortion were illegal, people would do it anyway. All right, this comes with talking about the back alley abortions and this kind of thing, okay? Which, by the way, feel free to look this up. The number of back alley abortions that were supposedly quoted during the Roe versus Wade case in the 70s was grossly overestimated by the attorneys who were promoting Roe's side. They admitted that after the fact. It hasn't changed anything yet, but those were not based on facts whatsoever, okay? Now, let's say this is the case, which I think it probably is. If abortion was illegal, people would do it anyway. That's true, but isn't that true of every crime? We make things illegal, and then people do them anyway. Does that mean we shouldn't have a law against murder because people do it anyway? Or against theft? Or against rape because people do it anyway, right? The laws are there to encourage people to avoid those behaviors, to provide a consequence so that people don't engage in those as often as they would, right? And making abortion illegal would still have that effect, even though some people would still try to get abortions in the black market or that kind of thing. Okay, should we avoid making laws if we knew people would not obey them? People don't obey laws as it is. We don't just get rid of laws because people don't obey them. The birth of an unwanted child to a young, promising woman would hinder her life. Okay, this might especially be relevant for you, right? If you're a young woman and you get pregnant when you're 16, 18, 20, 25, whatever it is, okay? You have your whole life ahead of you, this kind of thing, okay? Your education, all this kind of stuff. And that is important and that is valuable, okay? But again, back to my little analogy here. If you have a human being on one side, the whatever you put on this side has to be equal, at least, to a human life, right? And loss of education for a little while, or loss of income for a while, or difficulty in raising a child or getting it adopted is not equal to the life of a child, right? We got to keep that in perspective. Again, I'm not trying to be uncaring, just trying to be frank with things in this discussion, right? Killing an innocent human being does more than hinder their life. Obviously, it ends their life, right? And so again, I'm not saying this is an easy decision to make, and women in this situation need support. I think that's one reason why God designed children to be born within the context of marriage, so there'd be that support, but that's worth mentioning. And then a woman should be able to make decisions for her own body. This is probably the biggest one that I hear, this kind of my body, my choice kind of thing, okay? The fact is that you are ready right now. In fact, right now we're doing this quarantine thing. You can't make decisions for your own body. The government has told you what you can and can't do with your body right now. There are some things you can't do. You can't be drunk or naked in public. In fact, a lot of places you can't even be in public right now. You're supposed to be at home and this kind of thing. Only certain circumstances, right? Prostitution is illegal in most places in this country. That's you and your body, and the government says you can't do that, okay? Taking some kinds of illicit drugs is illegal, right? The government's telling you what you can't do with your body. Basically, you are free to do what you want with your body as long as it doesn't negatively affect someone else, right? Someone once said that you're free to wave your fist in the air as long as it doesn't come into contact with my face. As soon as it does, that's a crime, right? So you have the ability to do what you want with your body under most circumstances. But as soon as it causes damage to someone else's body or their property or this kind of thing, then you lose that ability, right? Again, the life of a human being outweighs your personal freedom or this kind of thing, okay? And so, yes, you have opportunity to do what you want with your body unless it affects someone else's body. And again, according to science, that's another human body inside the mother's body. It's not her body at all. Even if abortion were illegal, it would be impossible to enforce, okay? I don't think it'd be any more difficult to enforce than any other kind of crime, just because it might happen in secret. Domestic abuse happens oftentimes in the home. It's still illegal. We have laws against it, okay? So I think it would be difficult to enforce in some ways, but lots of crimes are difficult to enforce. We still have them. The taking of a human life is worthy of protecting. It's worthy of making illegal and therefore protecting human life in that respect. Okay. That's the end of things. It's about 35 minutes here. It's been going for a while. That's a lot of stuff to throw at you guys. I know it is. I'm going to have some more conversations in my class about this. I know Mr. Grepke's planning on doing that too. If you have any questions after the fact, feel free to contact me or Mr. Grepke. We'll try to answer some other questions you have about this, some other resources we can give you about these things. We're trying to be clear about this and kind of frank in the way I'm presenting it, but not uncaring to the situation, not saying it's very easy and like unborn children are like obviously it's an easy situation if you find yourself with an unwanted pregnancy or this kind of thing. Those can be very complicated situations, okay, especially in terms of rape and those kinds of things, all right? But I am trying to say that it seems very clear when you look at the theology, right? It's made in God's image. When you look at the science, that's an unborn human being, not something that's not human. It's not a parasite, that kind of thing. And then you look in terms of the logic. There's no consistent logical way to say that we should be able to kill these humans over here and not kill these humans over here. Right? And that gets us into some really, really dangerous situations when we start making classes among people. These people are worthy of protection, and these people are not. These people are actual people, full persons, and these people are not full people. They're partial persons or potential persons. In history, that's gotten us in some very, very dangerous situations. So hopefully this is a good beginner of discussion on a very difficult topic. Thanks a lot, and have a nice day.